Well, how about that one, eh? What do you think of that? I would call that maybe slightly less dull than last year. At least I spent the entire 78 lap race thinking about stuff rather than just ending up in some kind of vestigial torpor or something. Comment below your thoughts. Was this a winner, loser, or a meh? But ultimately, Lando Norris was the big winner here, him calling his Monaco pole rather special. And said risk paid off, but a 1-3 start showed that the car was alive and both drivers, well, they were buzzing with the best tyres to play with for the race itself. Which really gave Lando an edge over Leclerc in the closing laps, and with Verstappen backing them both up into Piastri, and basically just causing as much havoc as possible because, well, let's be real, they were either going for a last-minute red flag, but we'll talk more about that in a moment, but ultimately McLaren came away with 40 points to the constructors' tally, and I think now they are well over double in comparison to the next place team, which is I think Mercedes, by a couple of points. McLaren's got over 300 points already. It's insane. But quite honestly, I think this was a rather stable execution from Lando. It was actually a really good response to all of the concerns regarding his form and integrity. One of the main things that he'd been doing in recent times was eschewing himself completely from the likes of social media. And it really, this going offline, has paid off tremendously. All of the clap talk against Max, Oscar, George, what have you, whoever would actually be challenging him, will actually bear some weight if you get the results. And he did just that. Now within 3 points to Piastri in the championship, and now a further 22 points away from Max Verstappen. And yes, of course, Piastri does have a race in his pocket against the Dutchman, but as far as Norris is concerned, Max is falling away and it's now a 2-horse race, and he is in it. And that is, credit where credit is due, fantastic for the Brit. He needed to come back with something, or else risk going into the second act of the season with not much of a leg to stand on. Well, he's now got both legs planted, thankfully. And what a place to do it, because not only do you get a pole position around Monte Carlo, where he actually resides, he also goes on to win the historic race, rather convincingly so. He did not really look like he was going to be putting a foot wrong. Sure, Leclerc was challenging him, but as Leclerc showed last year against Piastri, who actually was on good form then, it doesn't really matter, because you can't really overtake. There were none of the safety cars that we were fearing, no red flags or what have you, and Norris was in complete control. McLaren was sitting pretty with the tyre advantage for both of them. And again, doing it around this historic track, your name will go down in history. So for Lando, that will be lovely jubbly. And also what will be really lovely jubbly for him is that he's the first McLaren winner around Monaco in about 17 years, so that will actually go down very well at Woking. As for Piastri, it was close, but his less than tidy qualifying laps were his undoing, albeit by only a few hundredths of a second. Seriously, it was within 600ths between first and third, as he learnt quite plainly last year. Completely ending up behind somebody else is only going to cook your tyres, so I think he did give it a try behind Leclerc for a bit, but then he backed off, realising that it's probably better just finish ahead of Verstappen, so that means he is indeed 25 points ahead of the Dutchman, and if Red Bull come roaring again, that advantage will be, well, advantageous for him. But ultimately, he was very circumspect. He was the less tidy of the two McLaren drivers. He said so himself. His slips, his drifting in qualifying, saying that he hit the wall more times around this Grand Prix weekend than he had in his entire career prior to that, was an admission that he was simply not on it, and Lando was. And there were many rumblings that he might have been playing the team game, holding up the likes of Verstappen, but that's neither here or there. And also, by the way, I am recording this on the Sunday. There might be some more findings that would come by the time I actually publish this video, but I will be out of town, so this might explain why there are a few discrepancies here or there. But I don't think there are going to be any more penalties coming our way, so I don't think that the results are really going to change. So yes, Piastri was the weaker of the two McLaren drivers, but it wasn't too bad. It was just a little bit too messy, as it was in Imola, which cost him that pole position start. So things to learn, but he is still ahead of the championship, so it's still very much game on. But for McLaren, what do they care? They're leading the constructors considerably, and Zach Brown stuck it around because I believed he said that if neither car got on the front row, he would have taken the first plane to Indy, where, as I am recording, the Indy 500 is going on right now. So it could be a double victory for the guy if Pato Award's able to nail it. But either way, McLaren, they're having a good time around this weekend, and Lando is leading the charge. But I think these next two are going to be the biggest winners in terms of their positions within the constructors and within the midfield. Racing Bulls, this clearly, easily, their best ever weekend. And for Liam Lawson especially, he's now got some points to his name at a time when Fernando Alonso, the other rookie, has still yet to score, and Liam's been able to do it first. So as far as he's concerned, he doesn't care. He played his part like a champ, and He absolutely nailed it. He actually had some good form. He's been on song the entire weekend. He felt stoked, and even though he was playing the game for Isaac and Max ahead of him, he was doing so effectively, acting as I would like to call Liam Sprawlson, and manifesting a massive gap between himself and P9 to allow Isaac and Max to come out ahead of him for both stops. In any case, the VCarb O2 once again showed how forgiving it is of a car to drive, especially around this circuit. It did come in clutch. Even though the last few races they had been a little bit anonymous, we managed to see the prowess and form that was potentially there right at the beginning of the season around Australia and China. Australia especially, they dumped a huge amount of points potentially thanks to strategy. But now the strategy actually came good. Isaac was able to be right there, Lawson was doing his bit, it was all working out completely for them, and it's a very vital time for this to happen because Racing Bulls were in danger of falling off the pace between Williams and Haas in terms of the midfield constructors title. But now, they're right back in it. They're within a few points, I think 4, of 6th place. They're in 7th easily, now well ahead of Aston Martin, Alpine aren't figuring, so it's all turning around for the second Red Bull team, and Isaac's the one in charge. What a rebound from this kid since Melbourne, it's incredible. And now Liam's got some points to his name, that's going to be good, especially since what's going on in F2, with Lindblad, yes, of course, getting a decent amount of points, he is now very much in the championship game, but still doing so very, very messily, with plenty of visits to the stewards. So, as far as Liam's concerned, he had a much cleaner weekend, so all's good in terms of trying to survive the season. And Ocon was a winner too. He finally got some clicking on with the front end and he hustled his car to P8 in qualifying, calling it unexpected and expected max output. He praised the team's effort and thinks that more is possible once the tyre games begin properly for the season. Yes, of course, you could easily maybe cheapen his position in terms of 7th place due to the fact that, well, anyone ahead of Lawson was going to be standing to gain quite a lot in terms of the actual place on the track, but quite frankly, Haas is not going to care. They scored more points than Williams, and after losing over 30 of them in the recent races, and having a couple of big psychological blows in terms of reliability failures in the last 2 races, no, they'll take this, and really doing a good service in terms of his reputation and standing with the general fandom. More and more of the signs that all of the hate and angst and vitriol toward him was more Alpine coded rather than Esty Bestie coded, which can only be great for him and the team. But Racing Bulls have now come in, Liam scored some points, that's going to be a good motivator, and what's more important is that they can no longer lose any more points due to reliability problems, and Behrman really needs to start qualifying that little bit higher, no more burns from the stern. Same goes for Ocon in a way, but it all did work around the place where he does remember fondly and getting that Alpine podium that one time. And then Ferrari. Definitely a perfect weekend for Leclerc to rebound from after last week's Imola, where it was his teammate who had proven to be the more composed of the two. Here, though, he was within a couple of seconds of back-to-back victories, which was really, really surprising considering that they were, and we were, going into the weekend thinking that we weren't going to be seeing anything from Ferrari, considering they're really not doing the business in qualifying, them being really morose, going, oh no, we're going to be really bad in the low-speed corners, only with an Italian accent, but it turned out to be completely opposite, or, yeah, okay, they weren't quite as fast as everyone else in the low-speed corners, but everywhere else, it didn't really matter, because Leclerc was so close to pole position, he was extremely angry that he missed out on that, but the fact that he was competitive, and we almost got back-to-back wins for this guy, really especially considering that this year's car is not particularly great, and Lewis Hamilton. I would still consider him a winner out of all this in conjunction with Ferrari, even though he was about 48 seconds behind them, and it wasn't the most clean of weekends for him, but it wasn't really entirely his fault, that being down mainly to miscommunications with his race engineer, which did cost him 3 places on the grid due to him impeding Verstappen, quite dangerously so, but again, not his fault, because he got told that, oh, was Max on a push lap, or was he on a cool-down lap? Oh, no, push lap again, but then it was too late. That could have gone really, really bad, quite frankly. He couldn't get a straight answer out of Adami, so really something's got to be done with that relationship, because it's starting to get a little bit fractious there. Either Ferrari have to replace him, or they really need to knuckle down over the summer break especially. But hey, 2 top 5 finishes in a row for Hamilton. I think he'll take that. It's progress, so it's something to give him credit for. And you've got to look at where Ferrari are now in the constructors. Sure, they're still in 4th place, but they're only 5 points behind Mercedes in 2nd place. Red Bull is only 1 point ahead of them. And then we get to the mess section, with Williams starting off. Even though Albon reached Q3, the softer rubber really faded, leaving him no better than 10th, and Sainz then missed Q3 as the softs felt like a lottery to him. The car did look quite handy though, yet neither found the sweet spot needed to get any higher up the top 10. And ultimately they succumbed to the likes of Racing Bulls, who had really floundered in terms of strategy, and the strategy with Williams just looked completely absent, like they weren't really quite sure what to do. And then ultimately it turned out yet again a strategy that would ultimately cost Sainz dearly, and really go to show that all of the warnings and concerns that he had, rather about one driver having to help out the other one, did come true. Not the first time this has happened, and I'm suspecting it won't be the last, where Albon ultimately scored more points than him. Even though it did look likely he did get the jump on him, they were told to swap positions, and yeah, he said he would do it in a way that made me think that he was going, yeah, don't worry, I'll do it. He wanted to do it on the last lap, but then Williams were like, no, swap the positions now, because red flag finagling and whatnot. That's what Red Bull were hoping, but that ultimately didn't happen. So even though Albon did come out on top, it's probably not going to be that great on the Carlos side of things, but then again, at least Vowles is aware of it. He did say to the press that that wasn't the way he wanted to go racing, where he would have to make one drive compromise in favour of another one. But ultimately, the performance just wasn't there. This was more damage limitation. They scored 3 points. That's only 3 less than Haas, and it's 9 less than Racing Bull. Sure, they don't really figure at the moment, but if the pace keeps up and Isaac and Liam really start to kick on and get a real good group with this car, they could then come back at the second half of the year, especially if they continue to develop the V-Carbo 2, whereas the Williams and the Haas, they may stall the Williams already had. It's just really surprising because the C6 looked really good with the Williams in Imola, but around here, it was just not clicking properly. But we really got to look at the state of affairs with Williams this time last year, 12 months ago. It's a far cry now from where we were. So, you know, it's a matter of perspective, really. And then we have Red Bull. Verstappen ultimately lost the soft tyre balance in qualifying that he had in practice and slumped to 4th place at the start of the race thanks to Hamilton's grid drop, and Tsunoda also had failure to try and get a good clean lap, and he sat 12th at the start. Loss of grip at the back really left both of them fuming, and they could have had much more. And it very much looked like at the beginning that maybe Max wasn't going to be really figuring in the top 3 fight between Leclerc and the McLarens, but ultimately he proved us all wrong, that Verstappen still had something in the tank to be able to figure, and also be a little bit of a pest. Not many people quite sure what he was going to be doing, whether they were waiting out for a red flag, maybe they would have taken the penalty of 30 seconds had they not done one of the mandated stops, or maybe they were hoping that the tyres would have actually come in clutch with Leclerc being able to do well on the C5 mediums, but Verstappen ultimately was on the suboptimal tyre strategy with only having one set of hard tyres to his name. Other than that, it was simply a case of Max trying his damnedest to maybe get 3rd place from Piastri, but it was all for naught. Even with Piastri having a mistake in the first stop, having a slow tyre change, unlike the case of Tsunoda, who was compromised by qualifying in 12th. He did make it to Q2, but just simply couldn't cut the mustard against one of the Williamses. And I'm not going to lie, my mind went there with the spanner of speculation and me thinking that, oh, Christian Horner, are you going to pull a Flavio and go, hey Flav, hold my beer, and then makes Yuki Tsunoda crash? Max then gets the win. But ultimately, any chance of Tsunoda scoring a point probably ended up for naught due to the fact that he escaped major damage when Pierre Gasly went spearing into his hindquarters. That could have been a factor in his performance since he was one of the slowest cars on the grid. So yeah, it was a mixed bag for this team, with Tsunoda underperforming, probably down to him not having the most optimal of car in terms of best conditions, and him no longer having the same spec as Verstappen. But at the very least now, because Mercedes had an even worse weekend, we'll get to them in a moment, they are now within 4 points of Mercedes in 2nd place. They're back in the game, and Christian Horner will be really, really happy about that with all those performance clauses and whatnot. But then Ferrari are right behind them by a point, so they're not out of the woods yet. It's still very spicy, folks. Now, we've got a little bit of a cameo today, folks. I don't usually cover Formula 2 stuff, other than the case of Arvid Lindblad, Pepe Marti with Lawson, but I'm going to extend my my opinions towards the person who just lost the lead of the F2 Championship. Alex Dunn, welcome up the ladder, and off to the dog pit you go! Why am I being this inclusive? Well, it's that viral clip that's been doing the rounds now. This is the kind of stuff that will give Formula 2 a really bad name, because this is the only thing that casual Formula 1 fans will be seeing in their feeds from Formula 2. Oh, what's this? Oh, a multi-car pileup. Oh my god, those drivers suck. It does all the drivers in that field a complete disservice. I saw it and it was like, oh no, oh no, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, no. It was, you could see it a mile off. There was no way, unless he was going to like maybe cut Saint-Devant or something like that, and then maybe risk losing other places or a time penalty. No, just speared right into the side of Martha. What? Dunn had completely undone all the goodwill that he had mustered in the last couple of races, resulted in 7 cars retiring from the race, including Dunn and Martin. Then you had Gabriele Mini just randomly somewhere, just hoping that somebody would pay attention to him. But seriously, this was just such a downer, and is only just going to cause negative press and attention towards Formula 2. But now, because of this, he's got a 10-place grid penalty for Spain, and because of him not finishing the race, he's lost the championship anyway to Luke Browning, even though it's only by 3 points. And then you've got the likes of Leo Fornaroli 3 points behind Dunn. So, oops! And then we start the losers with Mercedes. Russell did feel the car waking up in qualifying, but then an electrical power failure cut him to P14, and seriously meant that safety cars would have to help them out back into the points. And then to top it all off, you had Antonelli having some kind of electrical issue, which then saw him spearing into the wall in Q1. Oh boy, really fun times for Mercedes. A 2-stop lottery was their only lifeline of scoring points, but then their decision, a Gunther Steiner special, of saying, yes, we'll just go really long into the race and hope for a safety car to then change our fortunes. And, oh, Jesus Christ, it didn't even happen. Yeah, no, that wasn't even coming close. And then, out of desperation, George Russell going, blimey, I'm getting really sick and tired of licking my lips at the rear of Alex Albon. I'm going to try something cheeky. And I was thinking, as soon as he did that, cutting the corner of the Nouvelle chicane, right when you get those conditions of give it back before to back, I was thinking, oh, George! This is Mercedes taking a gamble and taking the penalty, but they all thought it was going to be 5 seconds. No, it wasn't. It was a drive-through, which is about 20 seconds, and you then saw Antonelli do it, and then frantically give the place back, because he was probably going to get the same thing. And then to top it all off, Brundle afterwards said that had George just stayed behind Albon, he would have denied George a point, and he would have ended up in P10 anyway, salvaging something. So it was all for nothing. Oh, Mercedes. And Toto was there too. Oh no. Oh, this has not been a good couple of races, because their advantage in second place in the constructors, it's all gone. It's all gone. It's all gone. But it was even worse for Alpine, with Gasly's flyer in Q1 blocked with red flags, so he ended up P18. Ultimately saying there was really nothing to be had, with Colapinto lacking even more traction and wound up last in qualifying. And I bet that Jack Doohan was probably not that depressed him not getting to drive the A525 around here. He probably would have had a similar situation himself, but hey, you can't blame Doohan for not doing the business, because he's not doing the business now. So he's just there, the cameras picked him up, he was just smiling, watching it and going like, hey, not my problem anymore. And every single weekend we see Alpine failing to score points means that they're further away from getting their P6 that they had 2 years in a row previously, and the Bahrain Grand Prix result of Gasly's turns out to be more of a fluke, that we may be ending in territory of Sauber's Melbourne fluke, where they got a P7 as well. So where is this car? I don't know. But at the very least, it should probably give Colapinto fans some pause for thought and thinking, well, hey, at least the car's just bad, and Colapinto's at least got some reason to at least just take some comfort in that. And then, of course, we had what we had with Pierre Gasly, him ultimately braking too late. He goes into the back of Tsunoda again. And, yeah, that ended his race, and it was a miracle that Yuki was able to continue. But what was the total disgrace is that it resulted in crawling back to the pits with no brakes, spewing debris everywhere, which was just a dangerous pursuit, especially going into the pit lane with no means to stop other than just a gaggle of people grabbing the car and hoping that was enough to make it stop moving. What a total farce. And then Sauber. Hulkenberg, they managed to ease into Q2, Bortoleto almost joined him, missing only out by a couple of hundredths, but their race plans failed to capitalise into anything, with both Saubers propping up the order. But unfortunately, their race plans failed to capitalise anything, they ultimately being near the back. Admittedly, it was quite interesting to see Bortoleto get a little bit frisky, actually managing to send a dummy move past Antonelli around the Fairmont hairpin and actually succeeding, but then Kimi got it back, Bortoleto went wide, and then went into the barrier, which then meant he had to do 3 stops in the race again. I don't know why they did 3 stops, other than just having to change the front wing. It was not part of the plan. But Hülkenberg, there were moments where he could maybe get up to 12th a little bit, but it was nowhere near as genuine a pace as we saw around the likes of Imola. There is going to be a major upgrade for Spain, but other than that, there really isn't much to report with Sauber. Yeah, okay, in terms of single lap qualifying, they're not too shabby. And actually, in terms of average lap times, according to the @Formula Timer page, Bortoleto was about 6/10 faster on average than Hülkenberg. So the pace is there for the young Brazilian. It's not all the plain sailing of Nico Hülkenberg, so there might be a little bit of a challenge, especially if the car ends up being a little bit quicker. And then Aston Martin. This again was tragic. Yeah, Stroll having a bad Q1 and then going to the stewards multiple times due to various infringements, including one with Leclerc. He then started around 19th, hoping the safety car gods would repay the favour, at least more than his teammate, ultimately. You know, the one who screamed with joy by getting P7 in Q3, actually genuinely showing some pace. He was able to hold on to P6 for a long time, but then his engine conked out. My own personal opinion, it probably wasn't the best of Mercedes power units because, well, hey, they're leaving them to go to Honda, so I don't think Mercedes would give them the best pickings, but that's neither here or there. We got a radio message going, "I can't push now!" That's probably the angriest radio message I've ever heard Fernando say. Even worse than in Brazil 2018 with McLaren going, "I don't know," completely dejected when he ultimately had to pull off at Rascasse and then not scoring any points again. But one thing we do have to make absolutely clear, it's not through lack of trying. Alonso still has got the pace. And all of this was in the vision of Adrian Newey, the first sight of him, the green bogey as dubbed by Christian Horner, and him turning out to not really have much to say, other than maybe saying that, yeah, based on what I know, Max is not really worthy of being an Aston Martin yet, we're not strong enough, and that probably puts to bed any rumours of him joining them next year, because Newey said so. Yeah, it was nice to see him there, but ultimately Aston Martin have fallen down to 8th place in the Constructors because Racing Bulls just scored so many darn points. Alonso was so close, man. It was so close. He deserved that because of qualifying. His form looked genuinely good. It was just, I am really starting to think he is becoming just as unlucky as Charles Leclerc. Come on, you got to feel for the guy. He's got the pace, he's got the potential. He just needs a car that doesn't bug out on him. This is the second mechanical issue he's had this season. And then Oliver Behrman. It was just one thing after another for this kid, wasn't it? Ultimately ending up with a €5,000 fine for some kind of discrepancy regarding the car or procedures. Even though he said he loved the car and it had potential, he was ultimately compromised due to the red flag situation in Q1. It relegated into P17, but then it really didn't matter anyway, even though he was going for it, hoping to maybe get anything into Q3 so he could finish not in last place, because he got that 10th-place grid drop due to him overtaking signs under red flags on Friday. That was already a downer. And then his attempt to be the first person to stop and get one of his stops out of the way, the mandated ones, fell short because the Haas pit crew were not ready for him. You think they would have planned this, but no. It completely scuppered any hope of him getting any higher. It was just, it was just relentless for this guy. Poor Oliver. It was absolutely chaotic for him, but not for the right reasons at all. And yes, whilst Monaco proved to not be quite as chaotic as people hoped, I do have something rather cool to share with you involving me getting into bed with Silverstone. To find out what I got up to there, and more, watch this video next, straight after this one, or this cheeky little hotel room tour.